All right, let's talk about a monument you think you know, the Statue of Liberty. We're going to unpack its surprising origin story, and trust me, it's probably very different from the one you learned in school.
I mean, we all know this statue, right? It's a global symbol of freedom. But what if I told you its original purpose is one of history's great forgotten stories?
Now, you're probably thinking it was built to welcome immigrants to America, and you're not wrong, but that's a meaning that came along later. It's not why it was created in the first place. Yup, you heard that right. The statue was originally conceived as a monument to celebrate the end of slavery after the Union won the American Civil War. So, how did a monument to abolition become the icon we know today? Let's dive in. To get to the bottom of this, our story actually starts back in 1865, and not in America, but in France. The whole idea came from a really passionate abolitionist and political thinker who saw America's victory over slavery as this huge beacon of hope. The guy with the idea was this man, Édouard de Laboulaye. He was a huge supporter of the Union cause. He proposed that France should give a gift to the United States to honor the Union's victory and, this is the crucial part, the liberation of the nation's slaves. But here's the twist. This gift wasn't just about celebrating America. It was also a pretty slick political statement aimed right at France's own government, which was a repressive monarchy at the time. Laboulaye hoped that by celebrating American liberty, he could inspire his own people in France to push for more freedom. Okay, so Laboulaye has this grand idea. But an idea is just an idea, right? He needed an artist to bring it to life, and he found the perfect guy for the job, the sculptor Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi. And together, they made some very specific design choices. They absolutely wanted to avoid the kind of violent, revolutionary image of liberty that was common in France. Like that famous painting by Delacroix. No, they wanted something calm, classical, and fully robed to represent a more orderly, peaceful kind of liberty and progress. And get this, even her headwear was a source of some drama. The traditional liberty cap was a symbol for freed slaves in ancient Rome. But it had become such a potent abolitionist symbol that some people, like Jefferson Davis, actually had it removed from the statue on top of the U.S. Capitol. So Bartholdi just sidestepped the whole issue and gave her a crown instead. But the most direct, most powerful link to the statue's original purpose? Well, it's basically hidden from most visitors. Down at her feet, she's actually stepping out of a broken chain and shackle, a crystal clear reference to abolition. The catch? You can't really see it from the ground. Now, building a copper statue that's over 150 feet tall was a massive challenge. And things got even trickier when the project's first engineer suddenly died. So Bartholdi had to turn to another genius. That's right, that Eiffel. And what he came up with was completely game-changing. He threw out the original plan for a rigid core and designed something nobody had ever seen before. Eiffel's design was just brilliant. First, there's a huge iron tower on the inside that holds all the weight. Then, a lighter skeleton is attached to that. And then, this is the clever part, thin iron bars connect the skeleton to the copper skin, but loosely. This lets the skin hang like a curtain, which means it can move a little in the wind and expand in the heat without cracking. It was one of the world's very first curtain wall structures. So the deal was supposed to be simple. France pays for the statue, America pays for the pedestal it stands on. The French got their money together, but fundraising in the US, it was a complete and utter flop. I mean, for starters, the country was in a major economic depression. A lot of people thought an allegorical statue was just weird. And plenty of others felt that France should have just paid for the whole shebang. The project basically ground to a halt for years, with newspapers like the New York Times just ripping it apart. To try and get people excited and to get them to open their wallets, Bartholdi sent over the finished arm and torch to be displayed at the 1876 Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia. For a small fee, you could even climb up to the balcony on the torch. It was like a giant teaser trailer for the final monument. The head became a huge hit at the Paris World's Fair, and that torch-bearing arm, it just stood there, all alone, in New York's Madison Square Park for 6 years, like this lonely beacon just hoping to inspire some donors. The big turning point didn't come from some rich benefactor. It came from a poet. Emma Lazarus wrote her now famous poem, The New Colossus, for fundraising auction, and her incredible words started to slowly shift the public's idea of what this statue was all about. It started to become a symbol of welcome.
And that shift in meaning really took off thanks to the guy who finally got the pedestal funded. In a last-ditch effort, the newspaper publisher Joseph Pulitzer promised to print the name of every single person who donated in his paper, no matter how small the donation. It was genius. Suddenly, this wasn't some gift for the rich, it was everyone's statue. So after all that, we're talking 2 decades, 2 continents, and a ton of setbacks. The statue is finally put together and dedicated in New York Harbor in 1886. And almost right away, just because of where it stood, at the gateway to America, it took on this powerful new identity. For millions of immigrants arriving by ship, it was the very first thing they saw of their new home. And so, over time, that mother of exile's identity, really sealed in place by Emma Lazarus's poem, started to overshadow its original purpose. The statue's meaning really did evolve right along with the nation itself. Its original story, one that's rooted in the intense battles of the American Civil War and French politics, is just a powerful reminder. It shows how the meanings of our biggest symbols aren't set in stone. They can shift and change over time. Because in the end, maybe that's the point. A symbol's meaning is never truly finished. It's constantly being shaped and redefined by the people who look to it for inspiration, for hope, and for a reflection of their own ideals.